Hi, my name is John Moore, and I am a shamanic practitioner and teacher. That means I practice and teach shamanism, which is the world's oldest form of spirituality. And today I'm going to talk to you about shamanic soul retrieval ceremony. What that is, I'm going to talk about what soul retrieval is, why people need to have soul retrieval done, kind of put it in a little bit of context, and how you might know if you need soul retrieval or you may need soul retrieval, and how to find out. So first off, let me say that soul retrieval is a little bit of I would say a specialty of mine. The vast majority of clients I see come to me needing some soul retrieval, and there's a reason behind that. And that reason is something we call wound resonance, meaning I had to go through a lot of soul retrieval due to traumatic experiences earlier in my life, and people resonate with that who have had similar traumatic experiences and find themselves attracted to me as a healer. At some point in time, I'll do another video about wound resonance. I'll do another video about the wounded healer and what that means, and that the archetype of the wounded healer and how that plays out in many areas of our life, but especially anybody who becomes a healer of any kind. So before I get into what soul retrieval is, I have to talk a little bit about something called soul loss. Soul retrieval is sort of the cure, the ceremony that alleviates something we call soul loss, fixes soul loss. So soul loss is a shamanic term for what happens when we go through shock or trauma. There are other ways that soul loss can happen. In the shamanic model, we have what's called a soul body. Some people might refer to this as the astral body. This is the spiritual aspect of ourselves that carries our life experiences even after we die. It's the part that you might think of as the ghost or the double, that sort of thing. There's a little bit more to it than that, but this is very simplified terms, okay? And so what happens when we go through trauma or shock, something is a threat to us, a part of ourselves splits off and goes and hides, escapes to safety. You might experience that in your consciousness as a dissociation. Dissociation is probably the biggest symptom of soul loss. We also know from modern psychology that dissociation is very, very common with trauma, and people who are diagnosed with PTSD frequently have dissociation. And dissociation is when you are experiencing a sense that you are either not in your body, you might be you feel like you're floating outside your body, you're not connected to your body, or you feel like things aren't real, like the normal world as you experience can be very dreamlike, and people can have, this isn't necessarily all the time, but you can have dissociative episodes. This can be triggered by stress, it can be triggered by reminders of traumatic experiences. So that's a big indicator of soul loss. So what happens is this part of us escapes to safety. This is the soul's adaptive mechanism, for lack of a better term, to sort of like, oh, I cannot witness this part that, what's going on here anymore. It doesn't feel safe. Observing it feels like a threat. I feel like there's a threat to my life, my survival. And so part of us splits off. Sometimes that part returns naturally. That's a natural soul return. And sometimes that part gets lost, gets stuck. It kind of gets stuck in time. And so if I were to have experienced a trauma when I was young, say a child, there's a part of me that has split off from when I was a child. And some people call these soul parts. I might call them a soul essence, right? So it's a part of ourselves and we really don't feel together. So there's different symptoms of soul loss. Dissociation is a big one. You can feel anything that's associated with PTSD. So PTSD is the medical therapeutic diagnosis for lots of things that happen when people are traumatized. In my opinion, and in the opinion of many others, it's overly broad. It's overly simplistic. I understand the necessity for it, but it doesn't get as specific as we might need. However, it does recognize, modern psychology does recognize this sort of fractured self, right? And that is a really good description of soul loss. It feels like we've been fractured. We don't have it all together. We're dissociating. You might feel anxiety. You might get depression. It can make you physically ill. It can make you feel tired, lack of energy, self-hatred, like all kinds of stuff that is really associated with psychological trauma. So trauma is a psychological thing. It's biological. It's stored in our body, and it has an effect on our spirit. So it really is, in my opinion, in my strong opinion, trauma is one of the major causes of lots of things like depression, anxiety, addiction. There is almost no addiction without trauma. Yes, you can easily become addicted to many things that are, that have addictive properties, but the setting up the stage for addiction usually comes from trauma. It's usually preceded by some sort of trauma in your life. Not 100% of the time, but really it is frequently a root cause of addiction. So that's soul loss. So what do we do? So for millennia, for who knows how long, because it predates written history, shamans, shamanic people, I refer to myself as a shamanic practitioner, would do something called soul retrieval. And this is a type of ceremony that's meant to coax or bring or return that soul essence, that part of the person, so the person can feel more whole, so they can heal. Now, there's a little bit of a difference in the way that soul retrieval is carried out in many indigenous cultures compared to the way that a modern practitioner like myself might do it. In many indigenous cultures, if you go through a trauma, almost right away, the tribal group is going to gather around you. They're going to take you to the medicine person or the shaman or whatever the term is in that culture, and your family group or your tribe is going to surround you with love and support and welcoming. And there's really something to be learned there. We can learn so many things from indigenous cultures, and we really, really should. But this doesn't happen very much in the modern world. Like if I experience a trauma, I might have friends or family to support me, but everybody has jobs. The community as a whole isn't going to surround me for several days and perform a ceremony. So when modern practitioners do soul retrieval, there is a ceremony. It's relatively short, but there's usually an integration period, meaning there's a period that can take up to maybe 6 weeks for that essence really to become part of the person. And the reason for that is that think of this part that got separated from you as a younger version of yourself that hasn't really developed, and it escaped to safety because it felt threatened. This essence, this part of you really has to feel safe and welcome and like it's coming home in that moment. Like this is a safe place for it to be, so it can fully integrate with who you are, integrate with the rest of your soul. Being surrounded by family, having sort of like a welcome home ceremony, that process can be much more rapid. But where we don't have the opportunity frequently, most of the time, to do that in modern society, there's usually an integration period, and there's usually integration work that a client has to do. That integration work can really vary depending upon what it is. The other thing that happens is that frequently people who come to me needing soul retrieval have to have some other work done first in order to create the conditions for the soul retrieval to be successful, for the healing to be, healing to take place. I really think of shamanic healing as a way to create the conditions in a person for healing to take place. I don't consider myself, I am not doing the work. I'm not healing the person. I work with helping spirits. They create conditions, and then the person is empowered to heal themselves. I realize there's like sort of a fine distinction there, and that's really how all healing kind of works, right? So I'm creating the conditions under which helping the person create conditions under which they can heal. So sometimes there's some pre-work that has to be done, some other ceremonies or something else, some other kind of healing that has to happen so that those essences feel safe to come back. So there's just a couple of sort of rules of thumb with soul retrieval. In that, if you go to a shamanic healer, you want to make sure that they have very specialized soul retrieval training. Soul retrieval is not something you can learn from a book. It's not something you can learn online, unfortunately. You have to be, it's one thing that you really have to be taught in person, in at least, a fairly long, not a weekend class, not anything like that. It's very involved. It's a very involved process. It is really sort of a specialty. So if you go to somebody who offers soul retrieval healing, they should be doing a diagnostic journey first, meaning they'll do a shamanic journey. They'll describe what needs to happen, what ceremonies might have to take place before soul retrieval will be effective, that sort of thing. They'll give you some information about what is to be worked on that day. They should have specialized training. They should do that. Do that diagnostic journey first. Lots of people come to me and specifically ask for soul retrieval, and most of the time, nearly 100% of the time, they do actually need soul retrieval. And the key to that is almost everybody on the planet could benefit from soul retrieval. I still have it done every once in a while. I will go to other practitioners that are colleagues of mine, and they'll do ceremony for me. And that has been extremely beneficial to my health, to my growth, to my ability as a practitioner. So definitely go to a qualified practitioner, somebody who has specialized training. You also cannot, I have seen lots of, soul retrieval meditations and soul retrieval guided meditations and how to do soul retrieval. So sometimes soul parts will come back spontaneously. Sometimes the conditions will be right, that a part can find its way back. And that does happen. And it happens in therapy sometimes, if you're doing talk therapy, or even you've just done a certain amount of growth or spiritual work on yourself. That does happen. But I'd really be wary of soul retrieval. It's not something I do on myself. I don't do soul retrieval ceremony for myself. It really requires another practitioner, and that's why I would go to a colleague if I were feeling like I needed some work to be done. And I do it pretty frequently. It's like a tune-up. Not that I go and ask specifically for soul retrieval, but I'll go for a healing. And sometimes soul retrieval comes up, and they will do that for me. But almost everybody probably everybody has had some sort of trauma in their lives that has led to soul loss. There are other things that can lead to soul loss, and I will do a whole video about soul loss and what can happen and how soul loss can happen. But the main cause is trauma. We've all been through trauma or shock at some point in our lives. So with that is soul retrieval ceremony, and I hope you will subscribe to this channel. I hope you like this video. I've got a whole lot more stuff coming out on shamanism and spiritual healing and the like. And I will talk to you real soon.